Have you ever felt like your shoelaces are just getting further and further and further away? Not in a literal sense, but just that every passing day when you go to lace up your trainers, it just takes you a little bit longer to get down there. I think for most of us, eventually, this is a fairly common experience. We start to lose mobility, our flexibility withers with age, and everything just becomes clunky and awkward. Now, I think there are things that you need to be doing on a weekly basis to make sure that this doesn't happen, so that even if you don't improve your mobility, you at least maintain it. One of the most important things is making sure that you are strength training through a big range of movement. Another thing that's going to help is just making sure that you are moving throughout the day, not sitting down on your ass for 12 hours at a desk if you can help it. Those two things by themselves are going to have a huge impact. A smart training program that challenges your muscles through big ranges of movement and getting your general physical activity up. But there's also nothing wrong with doing some direct bodyweight mobility work or stretching at home or before or after a gym session. I don't think there's anything magical to it. I don't think it's going to bulletproof your back. I don't think it's going to unlock crazy new positions, but it certainly doesn't hurt. And I've just put together a little follow-along routine that you can do at home with barely any equipment at all. I'm going to talk you through each of the exercises that I like to do from time to time. I suggest you give them all a go, and what I'm hoping will happen is a few will stick out to you that you find really challenging to begin with, and you think, right, I'm going to do that 2 or 3 times a week. You don't have to do the full routine. In fact, you don't have to do any of it. But I want you to try some of the movements, see if there are some positions or some techniques or some ranges of movement that you really find a challenge, and just do them from time to time. I'd recommend saving this video so that you can come back and revisit it, and make sure you take it step by step. And if you find it useful, don't forget to leave a like and a comment, and if you haven't yet, feel free to subscribe. Our first exercise is going to see us on an all fours position. Now the key with this is you're going to try to reach away from the ground. So think about creating separation between the floor and your chest, but you're not going to do it by rounding your upper back as I'm demonstrating here. That is what you should not do. Instead, we want a nice long tall spine. Once you're there and you've reached away from the floor, you're going to gently tuck your hips under, think about belt buckle to nose, and then you're simply going to breathe. Continue to try to tuck your hips under. You'll probably feel your abs kicking in a little bit. And when you breathe in, you might feel like your rib cage and your lower back is just expanding and stretching a little bit. Slow, controlled breaths in through the nose. Slow, controlled exhale. What we're going to do now is we're going to shift our forearms onto the floor. It's going to be exactly the same process, but you might feel a bit more of a stretch in the upper back. So again, our arms being in front of us and our hips tucked under means that that expansion as we take that deep breath in is going to happen posteriorly, so to speak. Basically, you might feel your back and the back of your ribs start to expand and stretch. You may find this difficult to start with. Again, a handful of slow, controlled, deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth for a couple of sets. Then we're going to progress the initial one. So you're going to set up on all fours, and then as you can see in the video, you're going to lift your knees an inch or two off the ground. Keep the hips tucked. Your abs will be kicking on right now. Then extend the knees so that you're in the top of a push-up position. The next step is to drive overhead. Don't let yourself sag down here. Actively press and reach away from the ground. You can adjust your foot position. You can adjust your range of movement based on your flexibility. And then finally start doing some alternating toe touches. Again, the key is to press and reach through the arm that is still on the floor. So you're getting a little bit of a rotation, a little bit of a shift, but you're also actively training some of the muscles that are going to stabilize that shoulder. The next thing I'm going to get you to do is just more of a general stretch, arms overhead. You're going to try and get your chest down to the ground. Again, I want you to keep your hips tucked, your abdominal muscles engaged, and take a deep breath. I should say at this point that I am incredibly immobile, especially my lower back. So you may look very differently when you're doing these exercises and you're going through these techniques than I do. This is just a rough guide. I don't move very well at all. I would then recommend going into a bit of a glute stretch. The key here is to try to keep your knee at 90 degrees and then add a little bit of rotation. Again, you will hopefully move with a lot more freedom than I can manage when I'm demonstrating this. But what I would encourage you to do is try and get your forearms down to the ground, rotate towards the working leg. That's usually a little bit easier. Take a few deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. Don't rush it. Try to relax. Turn towards the hip that you are stretching. And again, a few rotations on each side, a few slow, controlled, easy, relaxed, calm breaths will be really challenging when it comes to stretching out your glute muscles other hip muscles, but also getting that rotation through the trunk and bringing the shoulders into it as well. Don't overcomplicate it. Spend a little bit of time in that glute stretch position. Again, try to keep that knee roughly around 90 degrees, as you can hopefully see I'm trying to demonstrate here. And then just get as much rotation as you can. Once again, I am not a very mobile individual, so I am hoping that you watching this right now can get far more range of movement than I can. The next thing we're going to do is use a yoga block, but a rolled up towel will do, a rolled up hoodie will do, a cushion, a pillow, whatever. Grab something that you can create a little bit of tension by squeezing together. Place it between, not your knees, but just above your knees, in between your quads. And then we're just going to go for a toe touch hold. I want your feet very close together, train track straight. And what you're going to do is think about getting pressure across the inside edge. So I want you to think about heel and big toe, and hopefully the arch that lies in between your big toe and your heel. Oftentimes when we are in the gym and we are squatting and we are deadlifting, we naturally put the pressure on the outside of our feet. When we are squatting, we think about knees out, and that's perfectly fine. But what we want to do is just spend some time doing the opposite. So feeling the inside edge of your feet, bringing your knees in together. It's not something that we oftentimes train at the gym. So this is what you're going to do at home. Again, same process, hips high and back, nice stretch for the hamstrings. Take a nice slow deep breath in through the nose and exhale and relax out through the mouth. In between doing a couple of sets, just practice your toe touch. Just see if your range of movement is increasing. You may have far more flexibility than I do. My lower back barely moves at all. It's basically locked in place. You can also utilize your arms, as you can see there, to increase the stretch through your hamstring by pulling you down, but just play that by ear. That's not going to be pleasant for some of you, so you don't have to do that. Once again, just demonstrating from this angle so you can see more clearly. I've got a yoga block between the knees, a rolled up mat, a rolled up hoodie, towel, pillow, cushion will do. Gently squeezing, getting the inside of my thighs engaged, keeping the inside arch of my feet down on the floor so that I'm not letting my knees drift out, I'm not letting the pressure shift out onto the sides of my feet, and taking some slow, controlled, deep breaths. I exaggerate the stretch by utilizing my arm muscles to pull me down a little bit, and then after a set of about 5 breaths or so, I will take the yoga block out and I will just allow myself to practice my general toe touch. We're going to do the same thing now with a squat. Now, you don't have to elevate your heels, but I think it makes it easier. One thing that I should note is that I'm currently dealing with a knee injury and I can't really bend my knee much past 90 degrees. So I'm hoping that you can squat all the way down onto your heels. But the idea here is similar to what you did with the toe touch. We've got something between the knees that you can gently squeeze. You're going to think about keeping the inside edge, or you're going to think about pressure on the inside edge of your feet. Again, when we tend to squat, we tend to push our knees out. We tend to get pressure on the outside of our feet. So I want you to think about heels, big toes, inside edge, your arches. You can use your weight if needs be, although you don't have to. Again, I would really encourage you to try and basically squat all the way down. So if you can, get all the way down to your heels. My left knee does not bend any further than this right now without a huge amount of pain. So that's as far as I'm going to go, but same thing applies. I'm gently tucking my hips, my abdominals are engaged, and I'm basically doing the opposite of what most of us do when we do a squat. When we tend to push our knees out really wide, we tend to get pressure on the outside of our feet. That's not what we're looking for in this instance. You can then also use the weight to pull yourself low into position, as you can see here. Hips tucked under, belt buckled to nose, abdominals engaged, slow, controlled, deep breaths. I'm hoping that you will get much, much lower than I currently can. What we're going to practice now is a hip shift, and this has been absolutely key to improving and progressing my single leg exercises, both my hinging and my squatting. So split squats and single leg deadlifts, this hip shift is key. What I want you to think about doing is, again, putting pressure through the inside edge, heels down or heel down on the working foot, big toe down. And then what you're going to do is think about pointing your belly button and your hips towards that leg. So you're shifting towards it ever so slightly. What people tend to do in the gym, what people tend to do with their single leg exercises, is they tend to stay a bit square. What I want you to think about doing is pulling the leg that's working back up into your hip and letting the opposite leg, the leg that isn't working, rotate down ever so slightly. What I'm hoping that you will feel is your adductor, that's the inside of your thigh, and or your glute muscles really switch on and fire up when you're doing this. Take your time with it. It's going to be a little bit awkward to start with. Don't worry about the rotational element. You don't have to stay square when you're doing these exercises. In fact, I think you're going to get way more range of movement, way more stability, and way more muscles involved by doing it in this way. I've demonstrated front on, and I'm just going to show you here so you can see. I try and turn my hips ever so slightly towards the working leg, so towards my left foot. I'm reaching with my right leg, reaching my right hand, sorry, and I'm just pulling my left shoulder back, and it just exaggerates that. And if I was going to do a single leg RDL, I'd do the exact same thing with a weight in one of my hands, and I would probably use the opposite hand. So when I'm working my right leg, I keep the hand in my left arm. I had to think about that for a little bit too long, didn't I? I would really recommend playing around with this. Your hips will probably feel really nice afterwards. You'll unlock new ranges of movement, and you'll work muscles like your adductors and your glute medius that oftentimes get neglected or underutilized. Demonstrating from here again. And again, that's that hip shift we're after, just pulling the leg back up into the hip, or thinking about doing it that way. Now what I'm demonstrating is the same thing, but with a split squat. So rather than a hinge, we're looking at a squatting motion, and I've done exactly the same thing. Pressure through the inside edge, heel and big toe. I've pulled the hip up into, I'm thinking about pulling the leg up into my hip, and I'm turning my pelvis, I'm turning my hips towards the working leg. Tuck my hips under a little bit. One of the things that helped me to learn this when I was practicing at bodyweight is I almost thought about pulling my foot towards me. So my right foot is currently the one that is on the floor. My right leg is the leg that was working in that demonstration. And I almost think about scraping my heel back towards me. Obviously it's not going to move, but the action of doing that seemed to switch on my adductors a little bit more. The next exercise is going to just be a side bridge. I would recommend starting with your knees on the floor, bending your knees ever so slightly, tucking your hips under, and you're just trying to get as much range of movement as possible. If that's comfortable, then you can switch to what I've done here, which is lifting my knees up. And again, we're just trying to move the rib cage as much as possible. Stretch the rib cage at the bottom position, and then really drive down and crunch down on that side as much as possible. Once again, I just want to remind you, my mobility is pretty pants. And so I'm hoping you will get much more range of movement than I can manage in this exercise. Take your time, slow it down, deep inhales through the nose, slow exhales through the nose or the mouth, a couple of sets of a handful of breaths. And then finally, I picked this idea up from jiu-jitsu really, which I might get back to at some point. And it's just the idea of hanging out in a lower back stretch and using the weight of your legs and your hips to exaggerate that stretch. So take your time with it, and you're going to try and just bring your knees back over your head. Once again, your mobility may be significantly better than mine. You may get more range of movement. If you've got a head that is in any way a normal shape and size and much smaller than mine, then also that will probably get in the way less than my massive Easter Island head does. What I would then encourage you to do is shift into a complete rollover. So if you can't go all the way back, you can just do what I do, which is just lean my head to one side. But most importantly, just hang out in this deep position where you're getting your knees towards your shoulders, you're hugging your legs towards you, you're trying to stretch your lower back as possible. And once again, once you're in that position, just take some slow, controlled, deep breaths. I imagine to start with, it will feel really awkward and uncomfortable. You might feel like you can't take a breath in, like your rib cage has got nowhere to expand. And to start with, that's kind of the point. And then eventually you will manage to sort of expand your rib cage. You'll take those deep breaths in that awkward position. And then as I'm demonstrating here, you can throw in some rolls. So give this a shot. Let me know how you get on.